Good afternoon and welcome to a session for the Astana International Financial Centre on the aviation hub and opportunities for aviation finance. My name is Peter Griffiths. I'm the Director General of Aviation Administration of Kazakhstan, and we have a lineup of guests who can give their opinion. So introducing you from the top, we have His Excellency William Moser, the US Ambassador of Kazakhstan. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
We have Raphael Schwartzman, who is Regional Vice President for Europe for International Air Transport Association IATA. Raphael.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here.
From the Astana International Financial Centre, we have actually Campbell Holt.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone.
And joining us from London is Alexander Chapman, Aviation Director for Willis Towers Watson.
Afternoon, Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining the panel. We have a short time to have a discussion about a new development that we're looking at here. And in the previous panel, you'll have heard from that panel that two things were necessary, which Astana International Financial Centre brings to the Kazakhstan region: trust and confidence, and to also look at leapfrog strategy to be able to move Kazakhstan very rapidly into a very modern economy. Aviation is a key constituent of all modern economies, and here in Kazakhstan, this is not something which has been developed as quickly as we would have liked. For those of you familiar with the history of Kazakhstan, for a period of time they were on the blacklist up until 2015 of the European Union, and this restricted movements of aviation backwards and forwards. Now we're moving towards a new aviation environment, and my project here of developing the aviation regulator is to modernise not only the aviation system here in Kazakhstan, but all of the methods of managing the aviation system as well. And as part of that, we have a project to build within the Astana International Financial Centre the ability to bring in modern aircraft so that people from around the world can invest in aircraft for this region, but also to then allow us to place those aircraft into operations supporting Central Asia. Kazakhstan is a very large country. It covers just over 2.7 million square kilometres. And for those of you not familiar with travelling around this country, it can be extremely problematic. So if you want to go from here, Nur-Sultan, to Almaty, it's two bigger centres, it's 90 minutes by air. But if you wish to go by train, it's about 23 hours on some occasions, and 17 is the fastest rail service. So its aviation economy is absolutely crucial to developing good quality transport infrastructure travelling around the country. So what we want to have a look at as we go through the next period with this panel is to have a look at the opportunity that aviation brings to Kazakhstan, but also to have a look at some of the problems of bringing in aviation finance here so that we can modernise quickly and efficiently, buying new aircraft and deploying those aircraft into companies in the region. So without me continuing for too long on this, let's start talking to our panelists. We're going to start with His Excellency, the US Ambassador. The US Ambassador has been in this region for quite some time. And during his time in the region, I'm pretty sure that he's seen that things have changed a lot. So I have two questions for you, Ambassador Moser. What do you think have been the most effective changes? Where does Kazakhstan really make a difference? And how does aviation help us to improve on changes implemented so far? Ambassador.
Well, I think that's a great question, Peter. And I was here for the background for all of our people listening to this panel today. I was here from 1996 to 1999, and I was a member of the embassy staff in Almaty. And then I returned to Kazakhstan for the very first time I did return was in 2016, and then I came back as ambassador in 2019. I must say, though, that I was stunned when I came back to Almaty and ended up have to come to Nur-Sultan on that trip in 2016 because I could not believe how much Kazakhstan had modernized during that period of time. To me, it was incredible that I remember how sleepy Almaty was, and also that the quality of the roads and just the infrastructure in general. In fact, I had dinner in Almaty I was in Almaty Monday and Tuesday, and I had lunch on Tuesday at an Asian fusion restaurant. Now, if someone had told me in 1999 when I was leaving Kazakhstan that there would be an Asia fusion restaurant in Almaty, I would have told them, you're kidding and you don't know what you're talking about. That will never happen. Because the problem that I had in 1999 was that there were no restaurants to go to, except at a few of the hotels, which were pretty miserable. So what's actually happened in this period of time is that because of its great oil wealth, that Kazakhstan has actually spent a great deal of money on infrastructure. And I will note there is notable improvements in the aviation sector. I was the management officer in the embassy at the time from 1996 to 1998, and then spent a year as the energy attaché. And I remember we used to sit around and talk about whether flights in the country were safe. And we actually recommended sometimes that the ambassador not take certain flights because we were scared of the flight safety. And this was an actual day-to-day conversation that we had in Almaty at that time because we wanted to visit more of the places around the country, but we were very concerned about how safe the airline was going to be. And so now I think that what's been really comforting to be in Kazakhstan, at least from my experience, is that I have no reluctance to fly to anywhere in the country. And that has made a big difference in terms of my approach to travel. Now, I've got somewhat, I will say the affectionate term, screwed up because of the pandemic, and I wasn't able to get around to all the places I wanted to go because of the restrictions on travel during that. But I've never had any reluctance to taking the Air Astana or Air Aristan in the country because I didn't have the safety concerns that we had back in the 1990s. I think that radically, I think that if you look at Kazakhstan today and after traveling around the country, I have been surprised also by how much wealthier all the parts of Kazakhstan are. And that has been really a real surprise to me. In fact, I had an interesting contrast to this. I visited Baikonur in the fall of 1919. In October, in fact, and I was so amazed that it was very obvious on the Russian side of Baikonur that not a dime had been spent on improving the infrastructure or improving the city But on the Kazakhstani side, it looked pretty good, and you could really see that the Baikonur side that the Russians controlled had been frozen in time. And essentially, there had been no improvements made since the 1990s. But the Kazakhstani side had noticeably improved and really was a real example of what I've said there are the improvements in the country. Now, what do I worry about in terms of the future? Kazakhstan's got a real challenge in terms of the change of the country, of the change of the world from petroleum-based economies to more of a clean energy economy. Kazakhstan has become very wealthy because of high oil prices, and particularly got a huge boost in the 2000s when oil was around $135 a barrel. Those times are not coming back. And I think that's the first thing to be realistic for the country in terms of what its financial resources are. Because of the availability of American shale oil production, I do not, and I am not. I would be a rich man if I could really predict oil prices. But realistically, American producers can produce shale oil at $60 to $70 a barrel easily. And so any price going significantly above that is unrealistic to expect because they will always be effective at that. Then the second trend is we have an administration in Washington that is very, very committed to green energy. And in fact, part of the infrastructure spending that the Biden administration would like to see is a nationwide system of charging stations built within the next several years. This is inevitably going to put downward pressure on oil prices and on worldwide demand for oil. And unless other countries make up for that demand. So Kazakhstan has a definite economic challenge coming up, and saying what they are going to do in order to transition their economy. Now,
if I can just interrupt there.
Please.
I think there's sort of two challenges in there, and I'd quite like to sort of get a bit of a take on that, if I may, from one or two of my colleagues. Would you mind me doing that?
No, please, go ahead.
Actually, there was some real challenges in there from the ambassador, and obviously the thing that we're looking for there is how can AIFC play a role in meeting its objectives in the aviation sector. And it may be worth just touching on this stress point that the ambassador was coming up with there, which is the oil revenues and that. Maybe you might have a view on that. Actually.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Peter. A really good background. I just want to touch on, the AIFC itself. It's a young financial center. We were only launched in 2018, and really to support the overall goals of Kazakhstan to diversify and to improve private sector competitiveness. And like the ambassador was just saying, really to sort of move away from this strong reliance on the oil and gas industry and the energy industry. So we were set up to establish international standards infrastructure. And as I said, a relatively young financial center. We're only 3 years old, and we have been very successful in setting up an international standard legal framework, which is modeled on the principles of English common law. It's also very critically reinforced with the independent financial regulator, AFSA, or the Astana Financial Services Authority, as well as independent dispute resolution bodies, AFC Court and International Arbitration Center. Now, these are really crucial to provide the necessary sort of investor protection, or to add the investor confidence and the asset protection. So we're really, as a financial center, positioned as a center for raising finance or to provide services to serve across all market sectors in Kazakhstan and in the region. And of course, this includes the aviation industry as well as one of our key priorities. Now, if we look at the aviation industry itself here, what we find in Kazakhstan and in the region in Central Asia, we find that aircrafts operating in international airspace, both passenger and cargo fleet, are registered overseas, like in Ireland, Aruba, and Bermuda. And these tend to be for two key elements, why aircrafts tend to choose these jurisdictions to register their aircrafts. Firstly, because they're highly regarded for their airworthiness and safety standards. Secondly, they're also equipped with a mature an ecosystem to support the aviation industry, like the insurance, leasing companies, and other professional services. So our work with AAK, with yourself, Peter, and to create a new aviation hub is to really create these necessary conditions for the aviation industry to allow aircrafts to be registered here in Kazakhstan, and also to provide that necessary ecosystem to fully support the sector. And the key reason to establish this aviation hub in the AIFC is so that we can take advantage of the already existing infrastructure and leverage the benefits and the privileges that are offered to companies that operate within the AIFC. So, of course, as we make progress, we recognize the importance of engaging with both the industry, aviation industry, and also with service providers like the insurance and leasing companies as well. And we will continue to do this in order to, as we progress along this project.
Lovely, thanks, actually. Raphael, there's some challenges in there which you will be well aware of. The environmental concerns and the reduction in the use of oil that the ambassador was talking about. But also recently we've seen a big downturn in the aviation industry, which has been quite extreme. What trends in aviation sector post-COVID are apparent to you, and what are the opportunities for Kazakhstan in this region?
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon to all the colleagues here. Actually, it is actually great to be able to discuss this. I've been not going to Kazakhstan as long as the ambassador mentioned, but I've been involved with Kazakhstan since 2002, and actually I was the one recommending and opening the office of IATA there a few years ago, I think 7 or 8 years ago, because of the need to have, because of the potential and also the need to be involved in hopefully developing a successful air transport business in industry in Kazakhstan. So really happy to hear this initiative on one side. Now, if we can look at the trends, well, we can actually look at it from several standpoints, right? One is the economic, the other is an operational one, as you know well, Peter. Now we have also to consider the behavioral one, in not only for this crisis, but also because of, as you have mentioned, and the ambassador, the environmental one, and very importantly, the technological standpoint, and so on. So from the economic forecast, basically, if you look at the latest crisis, which obviously is an unprecedented one and never seen before in aviation, as all of you probably know, and also the recovery is never seen before, right? I mean, recovery in the past on any crisis have never lasted longer than 18 months, right? And never impacted more than 20% of our revenues. This crisis obviously has impacted over 90% of the revenue, and the recovery is still to be seen. I mean, there are different measures, 2023, 2024, so a disparity there. Now, different markets are actually behaving and recovering differently, and still, again, we are seeing variation. It could be due to restrictions in travel, vaccination rates, and obviously risk aversion in some cases. At the global scale, we have seen that the recovery first started with, or mainly driven in markets where they have stronger domestic markets, and then international travel has been going at a slower rate. And I think I can speak from here, from Europe, where we just had, as of yesterday, the implementation of this digital COVID certificate, which allows, in a way, to reopen the possibility to reestablish the Schengen market, which, as you know, was one of the biggest, let's say, and best connected markets in the world, and was fragmented due to COVID. So you can see the challenges on places that do not have a domestic market. In this case, I can use the example of Europe, where that has created Europe, that has positioned Europe to be actually not necessarily on the front line of this recovery, right? But things are improving. Now, in terms of the, also we can anticipate that the airlines are going to also try to do some changes in terms of the way they operate, consolidation of the type of fleet, which you have seen, right? Introduction of very fuel efficient, aircrafts, much more, let's say, nimble type of operations, and not necessarily, challenging a bit the past experiences. So that will be also linked very much to the sustainability. Now, in terms of looking ahead from what we are seeing on the summer, bookings on summer are still, well, that they are growing, but still very limited, particularly to destinations that are actually, they're limited to where there is an enforcing of travel restrictions, and it's growing very strongly actually in the ones that travel restrictions are being lifted with implementation, as I gave the example of the certificates on one side, obviously domestic in case of extensive vaccinations and things like that. Now, the interesting thing, and that's also linked to the potential of travel and tourism. Well, we have conducted global passenger surveys. We have done now the 6th survey in the latest one, we can see that 87% of respondents actually are considering COVID will stay with us for long term and that we have to live with it. Meaning 87% of the respondents agree that we have to live with COVID and they feel actually safe. About 75% of them do feel safe traveling by plane, which is very important, right? The other thing is that they do, 68% of all the respondents actually do agree that the travel restrictions did have a very negative impact on the quality of life. Again, this is all linked to obviously the demand, the potential demand that is there.
Thanks, Rafael.
Yes.
I think there's some important points in there. So if I may, I'm going to move on to some of the insurance and other financial packages, because as you know, the aviation system is not just about airplanes, but also working everything else. For those that are listening online, if you have any questions for us, and you can put that into the chat boxes, our analysts will be picking those up very shortly so that we can open the floor to you. I now want to move to Alexander Chapman, Aviation Director from Willis Towers Watson. Willis Towers Watson is one of the largest insurance brokers operating in this region, have a huge amount of background, not only here, but also in the Far East. So it does a lot of aviation business already. Alex, can I ask you what is the impact, if any, of the new aviation hub, and what potential does it have to work with Willis already does in Kazakhstan for the region's insurance and aircraft leasing sectors? Alex.
Thank you, Peter. You know, we're a very proud broker to, you know, your flag carrying airlines and other aviation, you know, operators. And what we've seen is just fantastic, you know, move forward in their fleet deposition, going to modern aircraft. Their results are looked at around the world in a very high manner. And the insurance market, the confidence, you know, is very high in terms of the track record of the flagship airlines. And as Willis, we're very confident about the region. You know, we have invested as a company in the region, you know, and grown there, and that shows really what we want to do going forward. And it seems a natural step hearing about the, you know, the AFC and what your plans going forward. You know, and it's all about, you know, finding the right partners, you know, building, as actually said, the confidence of the lessors and banks to move the project forward. And you know, as a risk perspective, you know, the insurers are looking for, you know, further investment, further regulation, and you know, further forward thinking. So I think it does go almost glove in hand with where us as an industry want to see you going forward. So I see it fantastically positively, but you know, building it in the right manner, and we're happy to be a part of that.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. And that takes us back to ACTU. You just heard there from Alex saying that we need to build this properly, but also to make sure that we take into consideration the wider elements of aviation. So what other opportunities will the aviation hub open for Kazakhstan? Is there anything that you think that we should be looking at?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again, Peter. So this, I think, aviation hub, you know, most people tend to think about it only from the aviation industry point of view. Of course, it will add a significant boost to the aviation industry and for Kazakhstan to really position itself to achieve some of the underlying goals that it has already. It has ambitious plans for. Some of the opportunities I want to touch on. Firstly, the hub itself, it provides an alternative jurisdiction for aircraft's registration, which will allow assets to be managed within a sort of close proximity to the home jurisdiction. We're talking about the aircrafts in the region, in Kazakhstan and around in Central Asia. Just to put it into context, I think there are about 3,000 cargo and passenger aircrafts in operation in Central Asia and in the Middle East. Kazakhstan alone accounts for about 800 aircraft, and I think this is expected to grow at 5% annually. Now, of course, for AAK, and you will know this very well, Peter, you're very much in the thick of it, this generates or has potential to generate increased income through AAK for Kazakhstan. But similar to the UK model, what AAK is envisioning for this income to be reinvested back into the industry, so into training and certification programs to develop or to contribute towards the development of the overall aviation industry. And then other opportunities like for within the AIFC itself, I think we're positioned really well. We already have the infrastructure, like I said earlier, an ecosystem supporting the aviation industry. And as Alex has alluded to, is critical for the confidence as we move this forward. So I think this new aviation hub will create an attractive proposition for international insurance, leasing, and other professional services to set up within the AFC and to operate from within the AFC. Now, we already have about more than 800 companies registered in the AFC. I think this will provide an attractive proposition for those existing companies as well as new ones looking into this market. And also on leasing, I think the market size globally is estimated at about 280 billion. Kazakhstan has a great potential to tap into this significant market as well. And it also enhances Kazakhstan's position, or this new aviation hub, as an alternative route for trading activities. This is another area where Kazakhstan really is working and making tremendous progress on, especially through air cargo. I think it will provide a really strong alternative route for trading activities, and also in modernizing cargo transport infrastructure and logistical infrastructure. So really significant opportunities for Kazakhstan, not only in the aviation industry, but also a lot of positive ripple effects.
Lovely, thank you. Ambassador, we picked up on your themes that you were talking about, and perhaps you might like to give us some view on what you've heard so far and whether or not it actually addresses some of the concerns that you've had.
Well, one of the things is, Peter, I'm excited about the possibility that the Astana International Financial Centre can provide support to this industry. This is exactly what I know that I personally would like to see happen with the AFC, and over time that this will mature, because we feel like having the source of capital within Kazakhstan will help its development. But I think but one of the things is, if I could take a little bit further what I talked about diversification, that one of the reasons why I'm happy to see this focus on aviation is because of the diversification of the economy. I was the State Department's director for logistics for 5 years, and we essentially, on a worldwide scale, tried to decide how to get things to any place in the world. And this is anywhere from Afghanistan or Tajikistan to Equatorial Guinea and all the places in between, and because that was what our assignment was. And when I look at Kazakhstan as the 9th largest country in the world with so many difficult places to get to, it is going to be impossible for Kazakhstan to have logistics interior to the country without a strong airline system. Yes, they will try to build roads, and there will be some success with this, but I really do think to be a logistics hub that Kazakhstan professes that it wants to be, it's going to have an internal system of aviation that works correctly. And I look upon this as really really looking at this is that the road and aviation infrastructure has to be on the physical side, and then probably rural broadband in order to really incorporate the rest of the country into some kind of communication chain on the virtual side. And when I look at that, is that is the only way that I see, or the most likely way for Kazakhstan to actually diversify its economy. Now, I really want to see Kazakhstan do more on logistics issues. I want to see good railroads and good trains and good roads, and that's where I'm hoping AFIC can help. And also, as I said already, is a more emphasis on broadband that links the country. And then that way, Kazakhstan will have the internal infrastructure it needs to actually diversify its economy. And I think these are the things that are really the stake in Kazakhstan's future.
Well, yeah, it's a great question to pose to Raphael. Thank you, Ambassador. Raphael, there's potential to grow here. Maybe the airlines are shrinking in Western Europe. Here in Central Asia, it looks like there's plenty of potential. One of the things that we don't have is any cargo operators. We have one small operator operates two aircraft. How can we use the AIFC hub to try and increase the capability of cargo mechanisms here in Kazakhstan?
I think, Peter, you're correct that the potential definitely is there. I mean, you mentioned before, both of you mentioned actually just the challenges of the extent, the territory of Kazakhstan. One, the other is the landlocked. It's a landlocked nation. But very importantly, I would also add, we have seen, and probably, Peter, you are familiar in the past, have seen a graph where we have monitored the center of gravity of aviation across time. And we predicted by 2039, that center was going to be in Asia Pacific, right? Well, the COVID-19 crisis has shifted that center of gravity basically 20 years temporarily because of the crisis, right? So that shows that there is a very strong potential in the region. And I think Kazakhstan, what that study shows as well is that Kazakhstan is well located in that transit corridor, I would say. So that is one important element to consider, which is the impact of COVID-19 might have accelerated the shift, which means also the high potential for the region to be a transit point between East and West. The other thing is to consider, if we look at the worldwide trend in growth, we're looking at basically the world growing at 3.2%. Well, the expectation for Kazakhstan is to actually grow at 5%. So again, we're seeing a very strong signals that Kazakhstan does have the potential to grow very strongly. Now, very importantly, on the cargo side, you have also seen a shift during this crisis, which changed a bit the trend in the past, where most of cargo was being done by passenger aircraft, right? And now, because of the crisis, you have seen cargo aircraft coming into operations even faster than before. And you have seen even passenger aircraft being temporarily converted to cargo aircrafts as well. So we have seen through the crisis an increase of the strategic need of cargo aircraft. I believe with the framework that is being set there, as you described in the beginning as well, building the trust and confidence on the modernized aviation system will be also critical in this element. But our projections do show that Kazakhstan and the region itself is in a very good position to tap on this shift and this potential growth that is there.
Yeah, thanks, Raphael. Alex, when we move the center of aviation markets east, then it's probably going to shift the risk as well. So this suggests that we need to build some of the mechanisms that you're looking for. Is there anything that you think we need to concentrate on quickly, listening to that?
Oh, yeah, and Raphael, very interesting what you're saying. I think the thing really is that we talked about, Peter, already, is just the infrastructure of the, domestic aviation structure to keep that, keep improving that. So, when the aircraft are getting more modern, the new generation aircraft can be, deployed around the country and take very advantage of where you sit in a geographic position where you can fly to point with narrow body aircraft to get real economy and and also environmentally, it's very very advantageous where you sit. So no, I think there's already a big confidence about the product is delivered by, you know, the flag carrier, and that just needs to be followed through to this project and really rise up as a whole country on the aviation. And I think the support will be given from the insurance market and all the service providers that you need. So I think the journey is one that only I see positivity, and it will set. You just got to set the foundations in the right way, and it will be a successful project, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks. Well, we get a question from our listening audience. We have a question that says, while the project is being implemented, what does AIFC offer to the aviation industry? Actually, perhaps you might like to pick up on this one as our AIFC representative.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. So, like I said, during this discussion, AIFC has already an existing infrastructure that any industry can take advantage of. So we have several benefits, privileges. Firstly, there is an independent dispute resolution body, or two independent dispute resolution bodies, AIFC Court and the International Arbitration Centre. Anyone can take advantage and opt in their contracts to use those two dispute resolution bodies for any of their disputes. And secondly, we also have the exchange within the AIFC, Astana International Exchange, and it's already set up to raise finance. We also have some unique products that are offered through that exchange, which are not offered outside of the AIFC or in the region, like green bonds, social bonds. And we were touching on the environmental aspect, so there is huge potential for raising finance through the Astana International Exchange. And also, again, the international standards and several benefits to add on top of the benefits that already is available in Kazakhstan. Some of the support measures we constantly get asked about: can we use or take advantage of the support measures in Kazakhstan while we're registered in the AIFC? The answer is yes. And so the AIFC, I think, provides that added asset protection, the investor confidence, and other benefits to top up, which is already offered in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, I think in addition to that as well, actually, there's one additional benefit. The country, being an ICAO state, has adopted the Cape Town Convention, and we're now putting in all of the mechanisms so that Cape Town systems can be then arbitrated through the court. So that's already in the process of being worked on, so that we can build proper mechanisms to ensure that aircraft leasing companies are able to operate here in the same way as they do in Ireland, Bermuda, and Aruba, with some trust and confidence that that will be translated through the court system to ensure that their asset is protected. And I think those are the things that are really going to make things start to move here. So that sort of brings us to the sort of final thoughts mechanisms. I'm going to pose one question to you, which has come from the floor, which you can incorporate in your questions. In your final thoughts, one of the things I'd like to ask you is, what's the competitive advantage of Kazakhstan for being a regional aviation hub? Why is it here? So I'm going to move around the group again and just get your final thoughts on that. But if you can take that as a question, I'd like you to answer and include that in your final thoughts, please. So, Ambassador, I'm going to deal with you last because I think that you'll be able to sum up all of our activity, and this time we'll start in reverse order. So, Alex, if I can start with you first, give us your final thoughts, and then have a look at that question of competitive advantages, please.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, from what I've heard, once again, I'll repeat, I think it's a great opportunity. I think all airlines, especially going forward now, listening to Rafael and IATA's stats and where we see them, are going to be looking for options that might bring advantages to how they move forward their business. So I think the more options they have and can review and see it fits their business plan to move forward is better. And in terms of advantages, once again, where you sit geographically is very interesting, because obviously the Asia market is growing. And I think, in terms of all the standards adhering to it, yourself and your position, Peter, and the investment you've had with the flag-carrying airline Air Astana only leads to, bring a confidence to the aviation community that this can provide a verified option for them to look at, and will be supported by, all the right partners. So once again, I think it's very exciting, and I've really enjoyed the insight into this project, and look forward to providing from our side any more accreditation that you need to move forward.
Excellent, Raphael. The aviation industry is a highly competitive industry, something which you advocate very strongly in IATA. Challenges and advantages. What does Kazakhstan have to offer, and especially in relation to this project?
Well, I think, Peter, that if I add to the comments already made, I think one, I see a very strong potential due to the, again, as I said, this shift that we have seen that accelerated a change that we expected much later, right? And that, if you combine that with the, what it was already said there, which is the right infrastructure in place and the right legal framework in place, which and regulatory framework, which is very critical to build the trust and confidence in aviation. As you said, it's very competitive, but it's very reliant on that. The other thing I would add is to not lose sight of environmental and sustainability challenges, because, as you know, on the global investment circle, this has become a major priority, right? So I think that has to be taken into consideration. And the other important element, which I think Kazakhstan has been moving forward as well, but we have seen as a major challenge for aviation in particular, due to this, specifically through the crisis, but we believe is here to stay, is the digitalization. So I would not lose sight of the need to digitalize, which is also a key element, by the way, for developing a very strong cargo sector, right? I mean, to be able to get these, let's say, strategic players to use the infrastructure or to decide on certain elements. I mean, digitalization has been proven to be a major element to facilitate air transport as well. So this is, I think, what I've been seeing I see positive trends, to be honest, in overall for Kazakhstan.
Excellent. Actually, Raphael was talking there about digitization, something that we've not mentioned yet, but I know is part of the project development. Any views on that as you give us your final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I can add on the digitalization. I mean, especially for Kazakhstan, it's one of the key priorities, as is already mentioned. And this will really provide that added benefit in terms of modernizing the existing infrastructure, both physical as well as digital. I think it will only complement the physical infrastructure and in increasing the effectiveness to position Kazakhstan as an alternative trading route, especially for air cargo, like I mentioned before. Very importantly, for digitalization to be really successful, the consumer behavior is also one of the key ingredients, because this adds to the ecosystem that is required to really grow the digital market. And what I've seen, I've been in Kazakhstan for more than 4 years now, and I can see from consumer behavior the strong adoption rate of digital applications that are developed. And this is, I think, one of the critical components, especially in the large cities in Kazakhstan, and also because of the geographical nature of Kazakhstan. This is critical, but also importantly supported by this really well-educated population, which has very strong adoption rate.
Excellent. Ambassador Moser, you started us off with some very provocative statements about the Kazakhstan that you met in the 1990s, and describes in some part that journey that you and the country have been on. You heard a lot about tools that we want to bring into the area, and I know that you and I swap views on numerous occasions to look at how we can improve faster and develop better services. Digitalisation was also something that we discussed recently, and as you know, we've been talking with the FAA and TSA plus the United Nations with all of your teams. To see how we can digitize things like cargo and use really good high quality mechanisms. And I think this brings us back into about leapfrogging some of the lessons that we've learned in the West to deliver to Kazakhstan that leapfrog strategy that was described by the governor of the AIFC earlier, but at the same time building trust and confidence. So I'm going to leave the last word to you so that you can try and sum up what you've heard and whether or not you think that we're heading in the right direction. Ambassador Moser.
Well, I absolutely do feel that that you're heading in the right direction, but more importantly, that Kazakhstan's heading in the right direction. The government has to have the political courage, though, to truly take the reforms that are needed. And that goes into better adherence to rule of law, digitalization of the economy, and then trying to then use new financial mechanisms like the AFIC to really make that leap forward. I do think this is possible, but what U.S. policy wants to see in all of this is that we have greater cooperation and better economic integration between, first of all, the economies of Afghanistan and, not Afghanistan, but of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and then with that as a core hub of around probably 50 million people, that this would grow into a greater Central Asian space, which would allow for Central Asia to become its own trading bloc, which we could then actually integrate with the rest of the world. And that was something we hope that could actually help Afghanistan's stability as well. Do you know, one of the things is I think that we talk about Kazakhstan's geography, but it does worth even mentioning that, it does stretch from the Chinese border to its part that it has actually in Europe, because it does have a small piece of territory that is on the other side of the Ural River. And so it is logical that if it starts to make the efforts it needs to make in terms of becoming a more advanced economy, and it makes the reforms that are necessary in its legal and regulatory system, and in increasing its logistics resources, which a great deal of which is aviation. And then it also has further economic integration to its neighbors to the south. It could actually become that worldwide transportation hub that it so much wants to be, because it's through the economic growth of all of its neighbors that will support Kazakhstan or economically reform Kazakhstan to be that center of the world and really be the new Silk Road that it's always wanted to be.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Well, I think we've had an interesting panel. So thanks very much to all of our participants, Akshu, Raphael, Alexander, and of course, Ambassador Moser. Thank you very much for joining us all today. For those of you that are listening online, thanks very much for joining us. And we hope to see you soon in the new aviation hub, so that we can help you with your issues of building an aviation system for the future here in Kazakhstan. Thanks very much for listening to us, all my colleagues at the Aviation Administration of Kazakhstan who are supporting this event. Thank you very much and goodbye.